Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat, Tuesday night. Here we are once again. Let me introduce the crew, and then we'll get into the topic of today. We got all the way from Pennsylvania, Mr. Chad Hutchinson. My fellow New Yorker from upstate, Mr. Eric Porter. Our center square, also from Pennsylvania, Anthony Ferraro. We're keeping him up late once again. I feel so guilty about it all the time. Mr. Stephen Reed from Scotland is in the house. From New Jersey, the professor of Prague, Mr. Ken Golden, is here. And one of our two pillars from Chicago is with us today, of course, Mr. George Lemmy. What's happening, everybody? For everybody who's going to ask, where's Lewis, where's Cans, and where's Chuck? Lewis is on tour. Cans and Chuck are sick. So there you have it. All right. So today, we are going to, all month long, I have been talking about on our morning show, I've been talking about albums from the year 1974, which are celebrating their 50th anniversaries, their 50th birthdays this year. Well, in March, I will be talking about 1994, but we're also going to talk about 1994 tonight here on the show. So what we've done is we've each picked our favorite 5 prog albums released in 1994. We haven't talked about the 90s in a while. It's a pretty stacked year. We've each got 5. We probably have a couple honorable mentions. So we'll go through these. We'll do two at a time, and then our number ones on the second go around. I'm going to turn it over to George, who's on the way I'm looking at the left of me. George will start with his number 5 and number 4.
All right. Number 5. Treelock Gertrude's Crazy Saints, Believe. This is quartet fusion. Indian influences, funk influences, some mid-level names on it. Chris Mindoki on bass, David Gilmour from Lost Tribe, and 5 Elements on guitar. Just a strong record throughout. For me, Treelock's best. My number 4 is Tony McAlpine, Premonition. This is a good lineup too. Tony Franklin on bass and Dean Castronovo on drums. You have a guest spot, 2 tracks, Jens Johansson doing keyboard solos. For me, this is a standout, like an underappreciated McAlpine album. Definitely a standout of his 90s stuff. Really strong material throughout. Chance to hear Tony really cut up. So if you like his stuff, this is one you have to have. My number 4.
Awesome. Ken.
For my number 5, I'm starting off with Pear Lynn Project. Well, I guess it was, Pear Lynn Project, Gothic Impressions. So Pear Lynn, he used to be the keyboard player in a band called Manticore, Swedish prog band. Actually, after Pear left, I released one of their albums. He's classically trained keyboardist, very, very inspired, influenced by Keith Emerson. In fact, I think it was ELP Reformed. He flew over, and I went to see him. I went with Pear to see him at ELP at the Man in Philly. He's got a number of people from Engelgard playing on here. He's got Ronnie Stolt playing on here, playing some acoustic guitar. But the emphasis is on his keyboards. It's very, very ELP inspired, influenced, and vocals are a little sketchy at times. Sometimes they're really good, operatic, and a lot of times they're a little pitchy. I don't know, but overall, I think it's a very, very good album.
I haven't listened to that album in a long time.
Yeah,
it's blasting. But I think that was his. I think that was his best album, frankly. So
I agree.
And a talented guy, very talented guy, nice guy, and he's got real good player. So that was my number 5. My number 4 is a guy. I love the way this guy plays, and I tried to reissue it with no luck. Michael Manring, Funk. So Michael is one of the preeminent bass players in the world, electric bass, plays the hyper bass. And this is a really cool instrumental album he did. He's got Steve Morse playing on it. He has Alex Skolnick playing on it. He's got Steve Smith playing drums. And, it's it's not just a showcase for Michael, although it is more or less a showcase for Michael. I mean, he really stands out, and there's a lot of solo bass stuff on it. But all in all, I think it's a really good, I think it's a really good album. Hadn't played it in a while, so I kind of surprised when we're going through the list of stuff that came out in '94. Like, oh yeah, wow, this is a good one. That's my number 4.
Ooh. Steven.
Okay, so my number 5 is the man himself. This is Fish, and this is Suits, which is his 4th solo album. It's got possibly his best guitar lineup with Frank Usher and Robin Bolt together on it, which was always a good thing. It's probably one of his kind of less celebrated albums. It's one of the ones that's spoken about less these days. But there's some really good stuff on here. There's a good mixture. There's some angry songs like Pipeline and Jumpsuit City and Raw Meat. He kind of does that heartfelt stuff with Lady Let It Lie and Fortunes of War. And then he does like a sing along. So you've got Mr. 1470, you've got the Emperor's Song. And as always, I mean, half the album is about his vocals and the way that he kind of delivers his trademark observations on life with a real verve and passion. So yeah, it's maybe not one of his out and out classics, but I think that Suits is excellent and worth highlighting nonetheless. My number 4, I'm guessing, will get a few mentions this evening. This is Awake by Dream Theater. And yeah, I mean, I must admit that at the time when this came out, after the kind of euphoria of images and words, it took me a while to come round to this. This is very different from what had come before with the first 2 albums. I would suggest that this is a heavier beast. Over time, it's grown to be one of my favourites from the band. It's maybe as close as James LaBrie got to being a metal singer. Do you know, there's a definite kind of edge to what he's doing on this album that you don't necessarily hear to the same extent any other point across the catalogue. And I really like Kevin Moore in Dream Theater on keyboards. 2 excellent guys have followed him. I just think that he did something that really clicked with this band, and I kind of missed the contributions over the years. But yeah, the compositions are really tight on this album. There's no flab. And I like the fact that it is interspersed by a couple of kind of, lighter moments. There's an acoustic song and it ends on a bit of melancholy. I haven't really stayed with Dream Theater as strongly over the years. I find this kind of time of the band much less contrived, for want of a better turn of phrase. It's maybe a little unkind. There are a lot of albums down the line now in that sense. But yeah, this is my era of the band, and I really like Awake an awful lot.
Cool. Anthony.
My number 5 from 1994 is The Fire Merchants, Lord of Atlantis, featuring one of my favorite jazz fusion guitarists, John Goodsell on guitar. It's a follow-up to their 1989 debut when he had Chester Thompson. Chester Thompson's out. Drummer Tos Panos is in. To me, this record is so good. I think it's better than the Brand Excommunication record that was released a couple of years earlier. There's something about his tone on this record, the riffs. The title track is just absolutely gorgeous. So Lord of Atlantis, The Fire Merchants, 1994 is my number 5. And my number 4, I'm going with Yes Talk. Not a typical Yes record, but Raven's Last Hurrah. I think The Endless Dream is a phenomenal epic track, and I'm also a huge fan of the opener, The Calling. I think that actually got some radio airplay back in the day when radio actually used to play those kind of songs. But Yes Talk, 1994, that's my number 4.
WZZO in Allentown used to play the crap out of The Calling.
Yeah, I heard it here locally too. Yeah. I remember when that album came out, I took one look at that cover and I'm like, really? That's the best you can do? God, it's like the epitome of laziness right there. Oof, man. All right, cool.
Actually, isn't that like a Peter Max cover?
It is a Peter Max, yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's terrible. Well, we got lots of variety so far. All right, Eric.
So my number 5, when I went through my list, I was like going through my fusion journey, I guess. I definitely have some that I don't have a lot of history with, but then most of them, when I went through them, it's stuff I have a lot of history with. So Ken talked about this one, Michael Manring Thonk. I have George to thank for that. Ken kind of covered it. The only thing I would add is I don't know much of his other stuff, but this one is killer, and everything else I've read where I don't know if he's the Wyndham Hill kind of guy or whatever, but this is really his heavy album, if this is something that you're interested in. I don't know too much other Michael Manring. Thank you, George. This one came to be from you, but that's what I'd heard. Now, this one, I never talk about singers, so I'm going to talk about a singer.
All right.
Right. I love this guy. I'd say he was a genius. Kevin Gilbert, Thud. I discovered him through Spock's Beard because I know he worked with Spock's Beard, read about all the other stuff that kind of came after it he wrote for Sheryl Crow, did a bunch of stuff with her. But when I started listening to him, he's got a couple releases. There's a couple live things. I mean, this isn't proggy. It has its moments that are proggy. It's kind of there's pop, there's rock, there's definitely some good prog on this. I love his voice. I love his writing. I think the songs are absolutely phenomenal. How this guy missed, I mean, I think everyone else around him kind of got popular, and obviously he passed away in 96, I believe. So if he had any chance to do it, he wasn't around long enough, but I absolutely think he's brilliant. Everything I've ever heard this guy do, I love. So that's my number 4, Kevin Gilbert.
Here's the only problem, Eric. That album came out in the spring of 1995.
I got
It says 94 on it, but it
Rate
didn't
Your
come out until
Album, I
spring.
got 94, so that's what I'm going with.
I know it says 94 on the album, but it didn't come out in the spring.
Yeah.
I checked that too.
All right,
Great album.
Brutal.
bastard.
Ken would have done the same thing too if he had any idea about Kevin Gilbert.
If I only knew, I would have.
Everywhere I looked, I think even Discogs had 94. Because I'm the guy who's going to make the mistake, so I did. So there you go.
Hey, I did that with Stephen Wilson.
It happens. It happens. All right, Chad.
Okay, so my first pick, or I should say my number 5, Polish neo band Collage and their album Moonshine, which was their third album. I think it's the first one they did in English. The first one, Bazny, was done in Polish, and the second one was called 9 Songs of John Lennon. No interest in that whatsoever. So this one came across my radar, and I absolutely love it. It's very lush, very big sound. It's up there with the best of IQ and Marillion, in my opinion, if you haven't heard it. This album stands pretty much easily at the top of their catalog. The follow-up, Safe, was pretty good, and the new one's pretty good, but this one, Moonshine, is an absolute classic from the neo-prog subgenre. And my number 4 is Mike Keneally's Boil That Dust Back. First time I heard Mike was I was working with the band Phineas Gage, which was Chris Busby's offshoot of Echoland with Scott McGill and the rest of those folks, and they were playing in Philadelphia, opening for Mike Keneally. And Mike kicked into his first set, and I was just blown away. So I picked up Boil That Dust Back, I think at his merch table before we left, and I've loved it ever since. And I think it's my favorite of his catalog. And if you know Mike at all, he's all over the map, from song, crazy Zappa stuff to the singer-songwriter. And then he's always got great song titles. My favorites on here are things like Cause of Breakfast and Skunk. But, you got things like I'm Glad There's Lemon Fresh Thorax in You, or Deep Fried Skinks Are Go. So Boil That Dust Back, my number 4.
Good choice. Hello, Asher. All right, my number 5. Let's get this Prezi working here.
Pete, you switched on us.
I know. That's why.
Turn Prezi on.
All right, Color Temple by Van den Plas. Debut album from this German progressive metal band. I hadn't listened to this in a while, and I'm like, why haven't I? Because it's really good, actually. I mean, this is one of those bands that has not released a bad album, in my opinion. Early on, very Dream Theater-ish, with a lot of the arrangements and stuff, but a lot of really good songs on here. Nice use of keys, some nice chunky riffs, lots of blazing guitar and keyboard solos. And man, Andy is just such a terrific, terrific singer. Color Temple, a great debut from this band from 1994. Let me kill the Prezi. Get back to my normal look. There we go. And my number 4 is going to be Full Circle by the Dixie Dregs. Really good reunion album. And of course, they've got Jerry Goodman on here and Mr. Dave LaRue on bass, joining T. Lavitz and Steve and Mr. Morgenstein. Thank you very much. I wish this album was longer, a lot of really quick little tunes and whatnot, but still really good. I mean, Perpetual Reality is so good. Sleeveless in Seattle, a lot of fun. It's a good rockin' fusion-y proggy album from the Dregs. I like it quite a bit. It's just amazing to think that this was the last studio album we got from them. It's so long ago, and because Mr. Morse joined up with Deep Purple not long after this, which probably is the reason why. But yeah, really, really good stuff. That is my number 4. Back to George.
Number 3 is from San Diego, California. Psychotic Waltz, Mosquito. This is their 3rd album. It marks a little bit of a departure in a lot of fans' eyes. A touch less progressive. There's a little bits of kind of like what was happening at the time with the 90s alternative stuff, but it's still mostly slightly progressive metal with slight psychedelic influences, as all their stuff is. Good weed smoking album. So I hear. My number 2 is, like Pete, Dixie Dregs, Full Circle, the reunion album. It gets it doesn't get as much respect as I think it should, because it's a reunion album, and also because it is slightly away from the more involved arrangements, more towards like incorporating Steve Morse band feel into the Dregs. But for me, there's not a bad song on this. This is probably maybe my 3rd ranked Dregs album, so there was no way it wasn't going to be on this list. So that's my number 2, Full Circle.
It's up there with the bad covers, though.
Yeah, what a weird
That's
cover.
terrible. That
I
font
had
is-
that one.
Yeah, the whole thing's terrible.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, it just spells cheap.
What label was that on?
Capricorn, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, Capricorn.
Capricorn. Yep.
I think I have it.
Yeah, it's a good album. I like it a lot.
They never made a bad album.
No.
Did you ever do a ranking the Dregs albums? Yeah, just asking.
All right,
Is it
Ken.
my
Back to you.
turn?
Yep.
Okay, my number 3 is Spark Psychosis X, and these guys were the originators of post rock. It's kind of hard to describe. It's very ethereal, very spacious, atmospheric. It's very melancholy, cinematic. There's elements of jazz. You get vocals. The vocals kind of strangely remind me of Robert Smith from The Cure. The piano is like sort of like off kilter. Get these like Miles Davis percussion in the back, trumpet in the background, a lot of strings. If you like stuff like Talk Talk, like the later Talk Talk stuff, like Spirit of Eden, Laughing Stock, things like that. This is the forerunner. It's basically like musically, it's like the sister to that stuff, and this came first, and I think it's a beautiful record. It's just one of those records you kind of turn the lights out in the room, you put it on, you just get lost in it. My next one, I think, is going to surprise everybody. Brave.
Really?
Ow!
Really?
I am surprised.
You're messing with us. Really?
I thought you were going to put up ELP in the hot seat.
Oh, I didn't think of it. No, I'm not a fan of the Hogarth era. I mean, you guys forget that back in the day, I was a big Marillion fan. When Fish was in the band, I loved that band. And I didn't really embrace Hogarth when he joined. But there's something about Brave that I really like. It's a concept album. but it's very, very moody. It's dynamic. I don't know. It just resonates with me, and I think it's. I think I'm not an expert in the Hogarth era, but for me, what I've heard, I think Brave is the best album once he joined the band. I'm sure an expert will tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't know what I'm talking about. But I can tell you that I think that Brave is a very special album.
Now, have you listened to that on vinyl in your listening room in the dark?
Yep, and I hide the razor blades. Oh, like that tune "Runaway," man. That's that's great.
Great escape.
I actually have the original vinyl, which I think is still worth like a lot of money, because they weren't pressing much vinyl in the 90s. You know, there was like no vinyl coming out in the US. So
I'll bring the water ice. Let's listen to it.
Yeah, it's I like it. I think it's not my number one. It's my number two for 1994.
Wow.
I surprised you all.
I am very surprised.
You didn't even.
I know Steven's surprised too.
Speechless. Do I need to go next?
Did I steal your thunder?
Who knows? Everybody knows. But anyway, moving on. My number 3 is, and it's really difficult to tell what it is because it's a clear vinyl thing in the sleeve. This is Promised Land by Queensryche.
Oh, okay.
I know this is not a fashionable pick. I know this album got a hard time when it came out. I really like this album. I think it's the last great album they did until more recent times. And I think that it's not prog. There's no doubt about that, but it is progressive, I would suggest, and it's challenging. I would say it's maybe their darkest album. And it's very complex. Once you get under the skin of it, though, it's really good. The performances are excellent on this album, and there's just a mood and a tone that it really connects with me. I'm going to really push the boat now. I prefer this over Empire, possibly even over Operation Mindcrime, probably not over Rage for Order, though that's still the sweet spot for me with this band. But side 1, going back to the day when we listened to everything in sides, I Am I, Damaged, Bridge, the title track, they're just fantastic. There's not much let up. It's not cheerful in any shape or form, but it's really good. And Jeff Tate was what a singer he was back then. He really was. And it's made all the kind of sadder for the fact that they very quickly turned left into the ludicrous after this. It really went south quite quickly in terms of what came after, in my humble opinion. But Promised Land was an excellent and remains an excellent album. Really, really like that. And in a similar vein, my number 2 is, everyone's going to say, "Oh, I can't tell what it is because the cover's garbage." And this is a re-release with a better cover, supposedly. This is a band called Siam, and this is The Language of Menace. And it's the debut album from a UK band, which was fronted by ex-Shy singer Tony Mills, who's sadly no longer with us. And
he was on the. He did that one album with TNT recently, about what, 2 albums with TNT. Okay, but I think the last Refugee was the one I knew that song. That was a really cool song.
Yeah, and that kind of shows what he was capable of. He was one of the very few guys that could step into Tony Harnell's kind of vocal shoes. He's a little bit more restrained on this in terms of that kind of high octane sort of thing that you would expect from a guy that was fronting TNT. He had a good solo career as well, but more in the kind of melodic rock and AOR realm. This was his stab at doing something different. Man, oh man, it's good. The rest of the band are pretty much unknown. Guitarist Darren Horton had a spell in martial law, and beyond that, I'm not really sure if anybody else in this band did much, but him and Mills and Chris Ward Evans, the other guitarist, really went through here by writing some fantastic, melodic, rocking, hard-edged riff, kind of laden songs. There's huge choruses, excellent guitar solos, and then you top it off with a supreme vocalist. And you've got songs like Open Your Eyes, The Search, Midnight Connection. Vocally, I don't think you can get much better than that. Siam released a second album the next year, 95, called Prayer. Might be even better. This is a band that I wish people spoke about more at the time, and I wish they spoke about them more now. And that is my number 2. It's Siam, and The Language of Menace.
Cool. I need to hear that.
I haven't heard Prayer in years. I sold a ton of those, man.
It's a great
that was
album.
a great record.
Yeah,
I got one from you.
Yeah, I'm sure, George. That was a great record, right?
Yeah, he sounds like Jeff Tate on that record to me.
Yeah,
That sounds
it
like
was,
a
yeah,
lot
it
of-
was like a great Queensryche album.
It's
Yeah.
as I say, it's in the same kind of vein. It's very Queensryche. Yeah, it's quite obvious in its inspiration, but man, did they do it well? Really, really well.
That was good. That was a good album.
George, have you tried the mulled spiced apple yet?
Not yet.
Can't get enough of it. Anthony,
Oh, really?
if you like apple cider, this tea tastes just like it. So good. So good. Anyway, Anthony, I digress.
My number 3 from 1994. I'm going with one of my favorites, Adrian Belew here. This and the previous one, Inner Revolution, are kind of interchangeable. They're kind of like he plays all the instruments, does all the lyrics, vocal arrangements, and everything. It's very Beatlesque pop that he loves to sing. The first track, May 1st, 1990, a song about the day his daughter was born. So if you really like blues, Beatlesque pop, little sprinkled in with a little prog, you'll love this. So I'm going with Adrian Belew here from 1994. Just gorgeous stuff. I mean, at the height of his vocals, just beautiful. Oh, okay. And then my number 2, I'm also going with, I don't have a copy. I used to have a copy. I can't find it. Dream Theater Awake's my number 2. I remember buying it 1994, 6 o'clock, Caught in the Web. Erotomania is just fantabulous. And a tune that gets a lot of hate, but it's a Kevin Moore tune, Space Dive Vets. I always thought it was haunting and just had that vibe about it. So Dream Theater Awake from 1994 is my number 2.
Cool.
And as Steven said, it is super heavy, much heavier compared to Images and Words.
Very different album. Yep. Eric.
Okay, my number 3, I'm going to ride Ken's coattails. So I know this one's from 1994 because he already did it. I'm going with Marillion Brave. And I'll say again, I love Hogarth. I honestly do. He won me over right out of the gate with King of Sunset Town. When I heard that track, I'm like, okay, they're fine. The thing with this one, I want to say Splintering Heart, but After Season's End, whatever.
Holidays in Eden.
Holidays in Eden. That kind of, I was like, uh-oh. I thought Season's End was terrific. They came out with this, and I can honestly say, Ken, I'm with you. This is my favorite from the Hogarth era. I think only Clutching at Straws, for me, tops that.
Eric, there's a maturity about that album.
There absolutely is. And it covers the gamut. I mean, you get something like Living with the Big Lie, which just rocks, it kills. Then, like you said, you get the Runaway, Brave. There's such diversity, and this has so much emotion in this record. I just think it's fabulous. I still listen to this. You got to be in the mood for it, or maybe you don't want to be in that mood, but when you're in it, you'll listen to it. But it's still my favorite from the Hogarth period. And I love Steve Hogarth. And how many frontmen have come in and done a better job than he has, to me anyway? I mean, you got Phil Collins. Hogarth there's very few that can say they did that, and the band has had such a long career with him and a successful career. My number 2, I expect a lot of people will be talking about this, Engelgard Epilogue. This one absolutely crushed me when I heard this back in the day. I know the first one had some vocals. This is all instrumental. Go listen to it. I don't even know. Ken, I'm sure, is a lover of it with the Trons and everything else. It's just monumental. Unfortunately, that was their last. I think they had a live album, right? Buried Alive came
Not
out.
a third. There's third.
Third one
They
came
have a
out
third?
much later.
Oh, is that more recent?
Bill Janolga.
Well, then I didn't follow up because I never heard the third one. So.
Eric, you absolutely need that third album.
It's great. It's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. But that's my number 2.
Cool. Chad.
Well, I guess I'll repeat what Eric just said. Epilogue's my number 3. I don't like it quite as much as Hybris, but it is a fantastic record. I think this is the first one I heard from them. I think I had this first. But not much else you can say about Angleguard. They were fantastic. Had them a couple times at Near Fest. They were wonderful people to work with. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about it. It's a great album. And then speaking of repeating ourselves, my number 2 is Awake. And you guys are talking about the heaviness. You're absolutely right. It's the first time that John Petrucci pulled out the 7-string guitar. So we got a lot of heaviness in there because of that. Obviously, the writing was different than Images and Words, which I played to death. So I could not wait for this album to come out. And it grabbed me right away. There's 2 ballads on it. I like 1.5 of them. Space Divest isn't my favorite. It's grown on me over the years. I always felt like it was a sort of an odd ending to the album. It was sort of a downer. It was almost like a really long bonus track in a way. But I listened to it recently and still Awake's awesome. I love that album. So there's my number 2.
My number 3 is Brave. You know, it's funny. When this album first came out, I think kind of Eric hinted at it. I was kind of like a little like, all right, the album that came before it, I wasn't hugely into, although I did like Season's End quite a bit, and I still do. Still might be my favorite out of all the Hogarth albums. And this was just such a dark and kind of heavy album, and not heavy like metal heavy, that it didn't grab me at first. But man, like within like a year, I was like, holy cow, this is so good and so serious and so back to what you want from Marillion. And I think, now all these years later, I think when we look at the Hogarth era, I mean, to me, this is a top 3 Hogarth era album. Could be number 2, could be number 1. It's that good. And I guess you guys have already said a lot about it, and I don't know what else I can add, but it's mandatory Marillion.
You know what else on that one, Pete? I meant to say it when I was talking. Has Travis's bass ever sounded? I mean, his bass is massive on that record. I love his playing on that.
His bass is great. Rothary's solos are tremendous.
Yes.
And all the different textures and colors that Mark Kelly puts down. That's a band firing on all cylinders here. And really, I've heard people call Brave their masterpiece. I don't think I could really argue that all too much, because it really is.
I think they locked themselves away in an old mansion or an old castle and got all the ambience of that. So that was weighing on them. There's a lot of cool stories around the album.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And my number 2 is Awake by Dream Theater. Kind of like what Chad said, man, I played the hell out of Images and Words. And, I still love Images and Words. But yeah, when this came out, I was ready for another Dream Theater album. I was so psyched for this, and it really did not disappoint. I don't think this album is as immediate as Images and Words. I mean, that's got all these amazing vocal harmonies and melodies, and it's catchy and it's progressive, and this is heavy and not quite as immediate, but man, 6 o'clock just hits you. Caught in a Web is terrific. Erotomania is terrific. I mean, this, Voices is really good. Innocent Faded is
Lie is fantastic.
Lies is great. I mean, it's a lot of really, really good stuff on here. And, unfortunately, this would be the last album with Kevin Moore, and a lot of other good stuff to follow too. But yeah, this is kind of like an end of an era for them, but I still love it. And I love the cover. So great stuff. That's my number 2. Back to George for number 1.
Same as you. You're Awake. Yeah, like Chad said, this is where John busts out the 7-string. So you got the chunk tunes like Caught in a Web, you got Lie, and you got The Mirror. And you have, to me, their best instrumental in Erotomania. 6 o'clock is funky. You got 2 underrated epics with Voices and Scarred. For me, it just took over that fall. It was like, I think it came out right before Halloween, and it took over that entire fall for me. And I've said before, and I'll stand by it, I dislike Space Divest a great deal, and it doesn't matter for me because it's last. I don't have to play it, and the rest of this album smokes. So that's my
It's a
number
long
1.
album, so you almost don't need it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Long album.
because it's not a short song either.
No.
And I will say, dick move from Kevin Moore quitting the band while they're in the studio. I'll stay and finish the album, but I'm done after that. Come on, dude. Work on your timing, man. Totally uncool.
Yeah. You know
My
what would
number-
be really cool? Because, gee, Mike just rejoined the band. They're doing a new album and they're going to tour, and it's the 30th anniversary of this album. How cool would it be if they went and played this album in its entirety and some new tracks and other classics? That would be a great show.
That would be a great show.
Not saying I have inside information. I don't know anything. I'm just speculating. I'm just speculating. So anyway, Ken.
I'm the only one to get this right. Number one, Zanglagard Epilogue. I mean, it's their best album. Hybris was the first. That's that's the one that took everybody by surprise. That came out of nowhere. But objectively, if you compare it to Epilogue, the vocals on Hybris are kind of weak. So you don't have to deal with that on it. Also, the thing with Hybris, as amazing as that record is, they stole from everybody. They stole from this. They stole from everybody. From Crimson, from Genesis, from ELP, from SFF. There's a lot of SFF on that album, and for Epilogue, I think they kind of developed a little bit more of their own identity. It's a better produced album. That's the other thing with Hybris. Hybris is not a very good sounding album, but this sounds better. And I just found it to be just a better listen. And I think it's by far the best album that came out in 1994. Heads and shoulders beyond anything else that came out that year. That's what I got.
Haunting cover, right? That's just so.
Yeah, I mean, they recorded this album they recorded in like a small studio in the forest, and Studio Largan, I think it was. And yeah, there's, like I said, these guys they were smart. They stole from the best, and they put it all together in a way that nobody else was able to, and they just kicked everybody's ass with those 3 studio albums and the live album.
Yep. All right, Stephen.
Well,
Tell us-
I've got the
tell us
best
more.
album of 1994, and
Tell
it's
us
head and
more.
shoulders above everything else. It's this. There you go. Of course it is. It had to be this, didn't it? Do you know? There's no doubt about it. It's the band's 7th album. It's their 3rd with Hogarth. I think there's a mixture of things that go on here. It's a reaction to, yet again, being asked to go and make hits. That's happened with Holidays in Eden. And that was maybe when they were asked to do that before they made Clutching at Straw, Misplaced Childhood. So they got the hits, but not the way anyone expected. Holidays in Eden was a different beast entirely. And this to me was a band just going, do you know what, let's just be us. Let's just do what we want to do and not let anybody else get involved in that process. And it works. And they captured a moment, and I think they were, pun not intended, brave enough to then just run with that. Because it would be easy to kind of say this is maybe too intense, it's too dark, it's too deep, it's too uncompromising. Let's, okay, they tacked Made again on the end of it. Yeah, it's a great song, but it is that, oh, happy, happy at the end of what really is not that kind of album. Man, oh man, this is just, it's phenomenal stuff. I absolutely love it. I always have done. Is it the best Hogarth era album, Ken? Depends what day of the week it is, and it depends what mood I'm in, but it's definitely in that conversation. There's no two ways about it. It's very singular in its vision, and it pulls it off. And there's lots of albums that don't quite manage to do that, and it's really something quite special. And the other interesting thing, or it was to me anyway, when I was putting this list together, was certainly my top 5 are very dark. They're all dark albums by bands that don't always do dark albums. It seems to be, I don't know if it's a reaction to the time, but I think it's certainly a reaction to the musical times, 1994, because there's an awful lot of musical change out there. And I wouldn't necessarily say that any of the bands that I've highlighted kind of tried to chase on the coattails of what was happening musically in the mainstream. But there's definitely some sort of reaction to something here, because none of the albums that I've chosen are particularly happy. I can't pick out many lyrics or even musical tones where you think, here's the cheerful one. And it's just, and something I hadn't really thought about until I came to write this list and put it together and kind of thought, I love these albums, and I was a happy enough guy in 1994, but all of these people definitely weren't. So there you go. But yes, that's the best album from 1994. Just saying.
I have a question for Marillion Bus. Is there a Hogarth era album where you could, in your mind, imagine Fish doing the vocals?
Well, I mean, aspects of Season's End, because an awful lot of that was written before Hogarth was on the scene. And the demos from Clutching at Straws and various things, or the demo disc, kind of shows the way with some of that and some of Vigil, Fish's solo debut. There are lyrics that intertwine and musical motifs that intertwine that they were clearly working on together at that point. So, whilst there are songs on that album that I can't imagine him singing, there are some that you can kind of hear his voice through. Beyond that, I would probably suggest no, not really. I can't hear him on this. He doesn't
seemed
kind
that-
of have.
Seemed to me that once Hogarth was in the band, musically speaking, they made a left turn or a right turn, however you want. And it was a complete departure from the Fish era. To me, it was a different band.
They left that Genesis influence behind them.
Yeah,
Yes.
they left that behind, the prog,
Mhm.
thing behind. I like Brave. Just they could have been called something else. I'd still like it. I think it was just a very solid record, and it was for me very uncharacteristic from what they had been doing once Hogarth had joined the band. So
Well, I think that Season's End musically is really quite strongly connected to Clutching at Straws.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a massive step musically between those two albums. I don't think you think, well, wow, I can't believe that's the same band. The vocalist is very, very different. Holidays in Eden, as I say, it wasn't made to order. Marillion were never quite as pushed into a corner as that, but there's an aspect on that album where they're not necessarily in control of everything that's going on. The documentary on the deluxe version of that is quite interesting. There's producers involved and various things like that where you think, okay, A&R guys involved in this in some way. And then beyond there, yes, they become a different beast. And this is the start of the different beast, even though it's maybe the most progressive prog album that they've done with Hogarth. I can't imagine Fish even contemplating the material on this album at all.
Anthony.
Steven, is there a Fish solo album that you could imagine Marillion doing with Fish?
No,
No?
I think solo wise, Fish is in a different musical realm altogether. I mean, I've included him here because he's part of the prog scene in various things. Is there a Fish album that's really prog? I don't think so, to be honest with
So
you.
he
but
kind
I
of
don't-
left that Genesis Peter Gabriel thing behind when he went solo then.
Yeah, well, he had to rely on other people to help write songs, so there was always going to be a change, wasn't there?
Like
Vigil's
Stephen Wilson-
probably the
like Stephen
closest he's ever
Wilson.
gonna get.
My number one, you guys probably don't even have this in your honorable mention, but I played this to death in 1994. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. You guys are gonna stick your tongue out at me. Division Bell. That's my number one. I love Pulls Apart. I love Keep Talking, and High Hopes is just absolutely gorgeous. The instrumental, the Rick Wright vocal. I played this to death in 1994, so this is my number one, Division Bell.
I played a lot that year too, for sure.
it was a better record than Momentary Lapse of Reason.
I like Momentary.
I do too. I love it.
You're both good. Eric.
All right, guitar. We hearing a lot about these guys. The Dregs just posted some dates for some tour, I believe in April with Steve Morse Band opening. So it doesn't get better than that, does it? I love the Dregs. I love Steve Morse. Anything the guy does, to me, he's fantastic. Great writer. Great stuff, like you guys said. Kind of a reunion album and just good instrumental, guitar driven. Get your keyboards and stuff in there too, but Dregs all day long. That's the best album in 1994.
Eric, have you seen his interview, Steve Morse's interview with Rick Beato?
He had just, because I watched the Mateo and then what a great guy too. I mean, that guy, he's just all class, such a good guy. I love him.
Yeah, it was well done.
Yeah, thanks for
I
sending
was
me
sitting there
that.
watching that and I'm like, I had really good questions for Steve too when he was on, but then Rick got him to play guitar and I'm like, I didn't get that. So that was awesome.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was, you know what? After that interview, I was left thinking every player who goes on Rick Beato's show should open up with a guitar piece before
I
anybody
agree.
starts talking. I think that was amazing what he
Absolutely.
did.
Yeah, the Andy Summers one, he barely played it.
Yeah. All right, Chad. You're number
All
one.
right. Well, number one, gotta be Brave. I love this album to death. I remember when I got it. I read the liner notes. I lived in Allentown at the time. So a lot of the albums here remind me of when I lived up in the Allentown area. I remember going over to Tunes in Allentown and buying this album, coming home and opening it up. I guess it was probably already dark out. It was nighttime. And I'm reading the liner notes, and the last part of the liner note says, "Listen to it loud and in the dark." So I had not heard a single note of it. I dragged my recliner over in front of my stereo because I didn't have a long cord. And I put on headphones and plugged it in, cranked it up, and just lay there in the dark for however, 70 some minutes, and was absolutely blown away by it. Sonically, musically, the vocals, the melodies, all the hauntingness of it, just absolutely fell in love with it. And it is my favorite Marillion album. Obviously, then my favorite Steve Hogarth album. I even earmarked Meet Again for when I would get married. And my first dance with Cheryl at our wedding was to Meet Again. That's where you're supposed to say, "Aw." No? All right. Have any of you guys ever seen the film?
Yes, I have it.
I've tried a few times. I've not gotten that far. Yeah, I have it just. Yeah, I have it just to have it. It's sort of a it's sort of a bookend.
Yeah, it's art house garbage.
Yeah, it's a shame because the album. I guess the topic is based on this girl that was found on a bridge in England somewhere, and they built a story around her. It's not her story, but they built a story around it, and it is such a cinematic type album. It could have ended up being a really kind of a cool miniseries kind of idea, but that film's terrible. So if you haven't seen it, unless you're really, really curious, don't bother. Keep listening to the album because it's a winner. It's the number one album of 1994, right, Stephen?
Absolutely.
Almost.
The number one album of 1994 is this.
Yeah, I knew Pete would get it right.
I had the pleasure of buying this and Hybrid at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And I remember the first thing I thought, like, what planet is this shit coming from? Because like Ken said, they utilize all their influences very, very well. So it's not like just like they sound like King Crimson, or they have that little bit of Tull or that little bit of Yes and they have it all wrapped up into this kind of very Swedish folksy. I mean, this is like, like we talk over on the Monsters Den show, we talk a lot about folk horror films. These guys would be like the soundtrack to like a folk horror film. It's just it sounds like they're playing this shit out in the woods, but there's plenty of electric stuff going on here. I mean, there's so much mellotron, and the Hammond organ is killer. The guitars are weaving around, the flute's flying around. It's just and you know what? Most of the time I pick Hybris as my favorite of the two, because I think for me, some of my favorite songs are on that album. I love some of those arrangements, even though, like Ken says, the vocals are kind of weak. This is a little more polished and it's amazing. And the third album is amazing. I tend to always favor the first album a little bit more, though, just because there's a couple tracks on there to me that are just godly. But yeah, this band is so good. It's just a shame after all these years we've only gotten the 3 albums from them. But hopefully they've got something else cooking, I think, or
well, two of the members are Anna's out, right, and Tord is out, and the rest of them are playing. So who knows?
Yeah.
I think they may cook something up.
Yeah, we'll see.
The thing is, Pete, when that record came out, it hadn't been anything like it for about 20 years.
Yeah.
Music, the whole prog scene had shifted in a very different direction. We had the whole neo-prog thing, and prog bands got away from the playing aspect, and there was more commerciality in the 80s. So
the testaments of these albums, I think that I always go, you know, we've got like bands like Wobbler and Agusa and Tus Mork and George Stowe and, you know, all these other bands from Scandinavia that are like blowing our minds now. But like you still can look back on these albums and go, yeah, this is still the shit though, you know, as great as all that stuff is.
Yep.
Without this, I don't know if you get any of that stuff, you know. So anyway, all right, let's what time we got here? All right, let's blow through our honorables. George, back to you. What do you got left?
It's already been called. Fire Merchants, Landlords of Atlantis, instrumental trio, kind of rides the borderline of prog and fusion. Fates Warning, Inside Out.
Yeah, good album.
Jim Mateos was actually disappointed because he feels like it's too similar to the previous record, but I think it's that, but a little bit better.
What was right before that? Parallels?
Parallels.
Parallels, yeah. David T. Chastain, Next Planet, Please. This one's kind of obscure. He was a rock instrumental guy, just decided to do a fusion record. This is really good if you can actually find it. And the Symphony X debut. People don't like it because the production is mid-90s small label production, and it doesn't have Russell Allen on vocals, but Rod Tyler doesn't bother me. And the songwriting is there for what it was going to be. So it's a good, not great record. That's it.
Cool. Okay.
I only got two. One that George mentioned, Psychotic Waltz, Mosquito. And I can't think of another band that sounds like Psychotic Waltz. And you'll be hearing some Psychotic Waltz news that I can't talk about. You'll be hearing some news soon. So,
Wow.
and yeah, well, there's an embargo. What can I tell you? And the other one I have, which was looking through the list of 1994 stuff, I was like, oh yeah, this was a really good album. House of Spirits, Turn of the Tide. German band, man, this was the best album that Queensryche never recorded. And I remember back in the day when I first started selling prog metal, I got tipped off to this album. I sold a ton of them. Man, I fell in love with this record. I hadn't played it. I don't think I played it in like 30 years or so. But man, if you like Queensryche, you gotta dig up a copy of this. House of Spirits, Turn of the Tide.
I bought that from you. I have that. I haven't
Yeah,
listened to it in 30 years either.
Dig it out, Pete.
I need to.
It's really good. George, when was the last time you listened to it?
I don't think I've heard it.
Really?
Really? It's
Yeah,
better
you
than
will.
Prayer?
Huh?
You like it better than Prayer?
Yes.
The Cyan record? Yeah, okay.
Yes. And I like Prayer. I think Cyan Prayer is really good. I think you got it. I'll make sure you hear it.
Cool.
That's what I got.
Okay.
Steven.
Honorable mentions, Van den Pla, already mentioned. I am delighted that Anthony chose the Division Bell. My only disappointment is that Lewis isn't on the show so that he can scream. I could probably hear him do it right now. I've also got Somewhere But Yesterday by Citizen Kane, UK neo-prog band, which is excellent. I've got Psychedelicatessen by Threshold, which is kind of early progressive metal. And I have Flower Mouth by No Man, which is Tim Lone's
yeah,
and
that's one I
Steve
forgot.
Wilson. Yeah, and I really like this. I like No Man a lot as well. So that's what I've got.
Cool. Anthony.
I got No Man's Flower Mouth too. That's really, really good. Kind of like psychedelic, kind of like pop. And then the Dixie Dregs Full Circle is my other honorable mention from 1994. Guitars, guitars, guitars.
Bingo. Yes,
Speaking of guitars, I'm sure Eric's got something with guitars for an honorable.
I do. I did want to mention Fire Merchants as well, and we have a connection because I think Toss Panos plays or has played with Keneally, if I'm not mistaken, Chad. So
Yes, that's correct.
we've got that. I like Schofield and Matheny. I Can See Your House from Here. And I'm gonna throw in a little Mike Stern, Is What It Is from '94.
Cool.
And those are my honorables.
Chad.
All right, I got a few. And it's funny. I would go back and look at this. It is like where my head was at the time. I wasn't sort of deep super deep into things yet. Obviously, the Anglagard and some other things popped up, but gonna start out with the King Crimson EP of Vroom. I was very excited to get some new King Crimson music. I know it's not a full album, but I played the crap out of this and loved it. I love the title track. A lot of quirky stuff on here, like Sex, Sleep, Eat, Drink, Dream. But cool EP. The Days of Magna Carta. Magellan's second album, Impending Ascension. I played this a lot too. I know Trent
Gotta
Gardner.
admit that one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Trent Gardner's voice wasn't the greatest, but the songs were fun. And it's before he started playing too much trombone on it. Got to throw Division Bell in there. I mean, that's what it was at the time. Loved it. Saw the tour twice. Saw it in Philly. Saw it in San Antonio. One I got from Ken. This is an early purchase from Ken Golden, suggesting some space rock, and that's Ship of Fools, Out There Somewhere. Really good British band. I think they only had 2 albums. Is that right, Ken?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, the first one's okay. The second one is great. Really, really good. If you like the Osric Tentacle stuff, this is not a carbon copy, but it's in that realm. It's really a great space rock album. And then, because this is where my head was, I had to put Talk in there. Now, there's a couple crappy ballads in there, Walls, and I forget what the other one was. But they performed it on Letterman, and it was dreadful. But the rest of the album, yeah, it's very different. There's some heaviness. I liked it at the time. I enjoyed it. Again, that Yes West, in my opinion, should have stayed with the name Cinema and left it at that, and would have been a good Cinema record. But there it is. Yes's Talk with the greatest cover ever.
All right. Let's see. A bunch of mine have been mentioned. So I had the Threshold on mine. I had Fate's Warning. I had the Citizen Kane. It's a great choice, Stephen. I love that album. I had the Collage Moonshine on mine. I also had Royna Stoltz, The Flower King, which is to me the very first Flower Kings album. Really solid. I had one that Ken released, Il Trono dei Ricordi.
Yes, good album.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. I really love that
good album.
artwork. That's
You,
that
you know, that was originally an instrumental album.
really.
Yeah, and then one
They
day,
should have kept it that way.
Eric would have loved it.
yeah, maybe. And then one day I got an email saying, we have a surprise for you. And they sent me the album with vocals. And I'm like, okay.
Ken, is that the one where the cover looks like the Wobbler cover?
Yeah.
Oh, it was Michael Bennett.
Yes,
Okay.
Michael Bennett.
Yeah. And actually, I have demos for a second album.
Wow.
Eric would have cut him loose if they pulled that move on
Yeah,
him.
you're off my label.
I have demos for,
good.
unreleased, for a second album that was never recorded.
What else did I have here? The self-titled Cairo album. Speaking of Magna Carta, that was a good one. And David Torn, Mick Karn, Terry Bozzio, Polytown. Excellent album. And Sabotage, Handful of Rain. That's all I got.
There you go, Eric. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that always reminded me of the Wobbler cover.
Yes.
Peter, there are horns on that Bozzio record with David Torn.
Nope, it's just the 3 of them.
Oh,
It's
I might
quite
check
good.
that out.
It's quite
might
good.
check
if
that
you can
out.
Find
It's a
it.
good
Yeah.
record.
Yeah. It's for many years it was only available as a Japanese import, but
Oh, okay.
well worth getting. Yeah.
Okay.
It's very fusiony, avant-garde, bouncy, great bass playing. It's got David Torn's guitar playing is really, really good on it.
And Bozzio is such a beast.
Oh yeah. You'll dig it. It's really good stuff.
Assuming that everybody refreshed on their 94 stuff, did you find that you still liked all the stuff you liked back then?
Yeah,
I was
I-
surprised that
surprisingly.
I didn't feel like anything was lesser than I thought it was
See, my problem was in '94, like Floyd and Dream Theater were like huge for me, but like '94 was like the year when I discovered I bought King Crimson Red that year. I started buying the Steve Hackett solo discography, so that's when I was kind of like really getting in all this. And so like a lot of the new stuff I didn't really get a hold of, but Floyd and Dream Theater were huge for me back then. And
That's when I started to slide down the rabbit hole. That's where I got, Ship of Fools, Magellan, Collage, Anglagard. That's when I started to slip.
You know what? I was looking at the 94 list, and I thought it was the year of the good, not the great. And I like my top 5 I thought was like, there was a big gap between those and like everything else. Like everything else you guys mentioned, like Collage, really good albums. But they were good albums. They weren't like mind-blowing albums.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I used to sell all this stuff. I heard so much of it, and there was a lot of good records as you went through the list. But I think the cream. I mean, we all repeated a lot of the same stuff, right? Brilliant Brave, Anglagard,
Yeah.
Dream Theater.
yeah, it's
No,
Patriot
I'm with
Blue.
you, George. I think this year has aged very well. It's interesting for the UK connection. We're looking back at 2010 on the next show that we're doing in a different kind of way. I found I knew these albums better. Strangely enough, I don't know if that says more about how you listen when you're younger, and also maybe what you can afford to buy when you're younger as well, to be fair, and how things impact you. But I put some of these albums on that I maybe haven't listened to for quite some time and thought, yeah, I still know every note of these. Albums that were 15, 16 years old, younger, maybe not quite so much.
1994 was also the year I heard Spectral Mornings for the first time. I was just like, wow.
There you go. A classic, right?
How the hell do you remember that? At 94,
I
you
remember
heard
those
Spectral
kind of
Mornings for
things.
the first time.
Oh, believe me. Well, because you don't you equate music with memories? I mean, that's what
I
kind of
do,
the
but I
magic
can't
of
tell
it.
you what I had for breakfast.
Anthony keeps a diary.
And Eric, guess who was playing quarterback for the Raiders in 1994?
Don't do that to me. Todd Marinovich.
Jeff Hostetler.
All right. So, of course, everybody watching, it's your turn to play along. Down in the comments below, list your 5 favorite prog-related releases down in the comments, as well as any honorable mentions you might like. And tune in 2 weeks from tonight, where the Prog Seat crew will go take some albums to war. We're doing album wars on the next episode of In the Prog Seat. We'll be announcing the 4 combatants in the very, very near future as soon as we figure out exactly what those 4 are. So that'll be happening 2 weeks from today. So stay tuned for that, and visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together.
All the
damn
damn
time.
time.
Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell to get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit that like button before you leave. For Chad Hutchinson, Eric Porter, Anthony Ferraro, Stephen Reed, Ken Golden, and George Lemay, I am Pete Pardo. See you in 2 weeks here on In the Prog Seat. Take care, everybody.